And now, with the codification of what is a straw man purchase, this may actually change the law a bit.
We're the Armed Attorneys. Today we're talking about the codification of the prohibition on straw man purchases. This comes on the heel of the passage of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was signed into law on June the 25th, 2022. Now, before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button. And today we're talking about a new section of the United States Code, 18 U.S.C. 932. This is a change in the law that we have on the heels of the passage of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Prior to this law going into effect, we kind of had a backdoor way of prohibiting straw man purchases in the United States. And when we say this term straw man purchase, what are we talking about, Edwin?
Well, a straw man purchase is whenever somebody purchases a firearm with somebody else's money for the purposes of then giving them that firearm. And straw man purchases have been aggressively pursued by the ATF. In fact, those of you who go to gun stores have probably seen the big posters that say, "Don't lie for the other guy," warning you about what the criminal penalty is for a straw man. So straw man purchases have been part of the ATF's enforcement program for many, many years. Interestingly enough, without a specific prohibition addressing straw man purchasers.
It was kind of interesting going back and looking at this because, as we all know, buying guns on behalf of another person, except in the case of bona fide gifts, were generally prohibited. But when we found out the algebra of how we got there, the old law was based on was, hey, you have to fill out a Form 4473, the firearms transaction record. You have to say who the name of the actual buyer or transferee is, and the way that they went at gun owners and people in these circumstances were saying, hey, look, you lied on the Form 4473, and that's what they really criminalized. But this comes on and was affirmed, this kind of process for how we prohibited these straw man purchases came out of a case where a person was buying a gun for another person who wasn't even prohibited. And what case was that?
Yeah, that was a case called Abramski versus the United States. And it was a split decision with the Supreme Court. I believe it was 5-4. So it was a close call. And basically what they said was they looked at the law and they analyzed it. And they said because Abramski was just simply buying it for another person, even though that person was not a prohibited person, and that was his defense, that still met the definition of him lying on the federal form and thus committing a federal crime. So previously, Abramski said it's a crime to lie on the form, and that in itself was the crime. And now with the codification of what is a straw man purchase, this may actually change the law a bit.
And we get this prohibition in our new law, 18 U.S.C. section 932, and this is the violation. It says it shall be unlawful for any person to knowingly purchase or conspire to purchase any firearm in or otherwise affecting interstate or foreign commerce for, on behalf of, or at the request or demand of any other person, knowing or having reasonable cause to believe that such other person, and then it goes on and it lists some, specific prohibited people who we know are prohibited under 18 U.S.C. 922. G, it lists drug traffickers and other folks. But this is the codification of the straw man purchase in essence, wouldn't you say, Edwin?
Yeah, and it brings up an interesting question. If Abramski happened today, could he be convicted under this new statute? Because like we said earlier, his defense was the person I'm buying the gun for is not a prohibited person. And so this now specifies that a straw man purchase specifically is one where you're purchasing it for a prohibited person, which Abramski was not, or you're purchasing it for someone who intends to use it in the furtherance of a federal crime of terrorism, drug trafficking, or the furtherance of some other felony, which Abramski was not. And so if Abramski happened today, could he be convicted of being of engaging in a straw purchase?
I don't think we have an answer is to answer Edwin's question or to not answer it otherwise. But it does raise the issue, are bona fide gifts still okay under the law?
Well, bona fide gifts definitely are okay. So bona fide gifts were confirmed in Abramski. I do not think they come under the purview of anything that was written in this bipartisan compromise law, in which a bona fide gift is one in which you go to the store, you are buying it for yourself, you spend your own money, you're buying it for yourself, for your own purpose. It just so happens that the purpose is to give it as a gift.
Yeah.
So that's perfectly fine because you're the purchaser, you're buying it with your own money. They don't examine how you're disposing of the firearm. It can be as a gift, which I will point out is as opposed to the House bill that was passed earlier this year, which did limit gifts to, I believe, only your children and your parents.
Yeah, and that's 7910 out of the House. That has not passed and is not passed into law. But yeah, the way that was construed is the only person who could purchase a firearm was the person who was going to own the firearm. So it was much, much more restrictive. And that brings up another important question with how is this new law going to be viewed in the wake of the National Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin case, which set out a brand new standard under which, potential infringements of the Second Amendment should be viewed. Now, the context that this is going to come up, and we're just going to have to wait and see, is someone's going to be accused of engaging in an unlawful straw man purchase under this brand new law. They're going to challenge the constitutionality of the law. And then the court, we have our new standard. They're going to look at the text of the Second Amendment, which is informed by the history and tradition of laws at the time that the Second Amendment was passed. And do we think this is going to meet constitutional muster at the end of the day, Edwin?
Well, it certainly will be looked at to see that it is not vague, that it is narrow in scope, and that it does touch on a firearms right that has historically been subject to regulation, which the purchase of firearms has been regulated since 1968. So it'll be interesting to see. Also, if this law is interpreted to be more narrow than the previous straw purchaser that was upheld in Abramski, is this now going to create a quote-unquote loophole, which of course then has to be argued about and attempted to be addressed in the future?
Yeah, but it raises a lot of interesting questions. We don't have all the answers just yet, but we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm. This is huge, by sharing this video. And always leave your questions and comments below. We'll get to those in future videos. And until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.